Hi, I'm Melanie Bunn. I'm a registered nurse. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am honored and thrilled to be invited back. It's always a real honor when somebody invites you to something, and then when they invite you back, that just like escalates the honor. So I'm so honored to be here, to be part of the Duke Caregiver Community event, and really grateful and appreciative to Dementia Alliance for sponsoring me being able to be here, especially to talk about such an important topic. The topic of how do we develop strategies? How do we develop approaches and support and tips for the things that people living with dementia do that apparently seem perfectly normal and reasonable to them, and to the rest of us kind of have a little confusing kind of impact. So we're going to talk about attitudes. We're going to talk about awareness, and we're going to talk about the most important, maybe, I don't know, that could be debated, action. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're thinking about attitudes. What we're really thinking about is the way we, with our brains, with our understanding, with our skills and our abilities, the way we understand the person living with dementia, our attitude towards the person living with dementia. Now, I believe in my head, I know in my head that that person is doing the absolute best that he or she can do. I know that. And you probably know that as well. And you probably, when you're sitting here on this call or on this presentation, you probably know, yes, I agree with that. My husband or my wife or my grandparent or my parent, my sibling, my client, my patient, my person is doing the best. I believe that. I know that. I claim that. And when you're in that situation, this is not always what's in charge. In that moment, my head is not always what's making the decision. Because in that moment, my attitude is not as kind. My attitude is not as based on what the person can do. My attitude changed a little bit to my perspective instead of the person living with dementia. So I can't see you. I wish I could be with you, but I can't see you. But I'm going to trust you when I ask you to do something, that you are going to do it with me. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to put your hand on your forehead like this. This is a critically important part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that is where your grown-up you comes from. This is the part of your brain that is where your logic and your reason and your ability to control your impulses and your ability to make choices and your ability to organize your life and yourself. This is the part of the brain where that comes from. It's also the part of the brain where something really important for care partners lives. Now, remembering that this part of the brain doesn't really start completely working reliably, dependably until late teens to mid-20s. And for some of us, people think that we're still waiting for it to start working. Maybe some of y'all are like that as well. But this part of the brain, the function that I want to talk about for just a minute, is that idea of I can look at my perspective. I can look at my perspective and I can say, this is the way I see this situation. I see this situation in this way. The other person is looking at the situation from this way. So I look at this situation and I say, My husband should not be driving anymore. He's had 14 wrecks in the last 2 months, and some of them were really scary wrecks. He shouldn't be driving anymore. My husband, on the other side, on the other hand, looks at the situation, completely different situation for him, because he looks at the situation and he says, I've been driving for the past 60 years. I can drive. There's no problem with that. And so what winds up happening is this. I look at the situation, the person I'm working with looks at the situation, and we wind up butting heads because we have this attitude. We look at the person in the moment, the person living with dementia, and we think, he can do it when he wants to. He can do it when he tries. If he were to try, he could do it. Or, Mom has always loved her best. And so Mom will do it for my sister, but she's not going to do it for me because she's always loved my sister best. We have this attitude that when people do things, they're doing it on purpose. He won't take a shower. He won't stay in the house. He won't. So it's this idea that it's on purpose, that's intentional. She just doesn't pay attention. If she would concentrate, she could do it. If she would just concentrate. And then it's he and she and he and she and he and she and he and she and he and she. And it's what it comes down to is this idea that what the person is doing is a choice. That if I do this and I don't do this, it's because I'm choosing to do this and not to do this. So take a minute and think about how many things in your life you do because they're choices, and how many things in your life you do just because it's part of your routine. It's just the automatic kind of thing. So you get in your car and you don't choose to put your seatbelt on. It's just the next thing. It just happens automatically. And if I've got dementia and I open the freezer and I see the ice cream, it feels like it's a choice for me to take the ice cream out and eat it. And the reality is, it might just be the reflex. So let's give ourselves some grace. Let's give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. And let's give that person living with dementia a little bit of grace as well, and a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. So we're going to start with our attitudes. So what can we do about attitude? Well, a lot of times people will say, the person needs to learn more. You need to understand. You need to know. And I make my living doing education. I'm a big believer in knowing. I'm a big believer in teaching people. I'm a big believer in sharing the world of information and what we know about dementia. That is really important. And attitude is beyond education. Attitude comes with, yes, education and some awareness and some options of what you can do. So we're going to start with that attitude. We're going to think about what do I, and I'm going to actually have to write this down. What can I do starting don't y'all wait till next week. Don't y'all wait till next month. Don't y'all wait till next year, because you know what? Tomorrow never comes. Next week never comes. Next year never comes. I want you to think, what can I do to start right now to change my attitude? And part of what you can do is think about your language. Where it starts is the words that you do. So instead of saying he can do it when he tries, if we pull back and we say, sometimes it seems like he can do it and sometimes it doesn't work. If you pull back and say she'll do it for my sibling, but not for me. Pull back and say, there's something going on when my sister spends time with her that's not happening when I'm there. Pull back. Instead of he does it on purpose, what is he trying to accomplish in this moment? Pull back. Instead of she doesn't pay attention or any of these other things, pull back and reframe them in your mind using some of those beautiful words in your amazing brain. So we've talked a good bit about that really important thing of attitude. And until we get that right, the rest of this is just going to have limited impact, because we're going to talk about awareness. Now, many of you have probably seen these brains before. You may have seen these brains from me before. And I really don't think we can see them often enough. Because to me, these brains give me the awareness of what I just said, that person living with dementia is doing the best they can. They are doing the best they can. Because if you look at that beautiful, healthy brain, and you look at that beautiful Alzheimer's brain, you see some differences. You see that Alzheimer's brain is shriveling up. It actually is going to shrivel up to 1/3 of the size of the normal brain. You look at that Alzheimer's brain and you see that it's darker. And it's not darker because it's sunburned, or it's not darker because of what the person ate. It's darker because that brain has debris and inflammation. That's an irritated, inflamed, distressed brain. You look at that Alzheimer's brain and you realize that those brain cells themselves are actually dying. That those brain cells themselves aren't there anymore. The structure of them might be, the skeleton of them might be, but the cells aren't alive, they aren't functioning anymore. So as those cells die, they collapse, and as they collapse, they leave behind space. And as they leave behind space, that space fills up with fluid. And so if you look at that brain on the left, that brain is full. And that brain is working and functioning. You look at that brain on the right, and you can see that brain is struggling. So the best of the brain on the left is going to be different than the best of that brain on the right. That awareness that person living with dementia is doing the best they can with what they've got left to work on. And how well would you do if you had 1/3 of your teeth? If you had 1/3 of your teeth, how would your eating go? If you had 1/3 of your bicep strength, could you do the same amount of work at the gym? If you had 1/3 of the amount of money that you've got, what would your options be? 1/3 is significant, and that person is doing the best he or she can with what they've got. So we've talked about the idea of attitude. We've talked about the importance of having an awareness of what's really happening in the person's brain. We're going to start talking about what can some of the actions be. So one of the things we really can do is really think about what really happened. Because if I say, let me think of a good way. If I say, I am so frustrated, I have told her and told her and told her that she has to cut the stove off. I have told her and told her and told her that she has to change clothes I have told her and told her. What really happened is that person living with dementia is having change in the physical, in the emotional, in their social, in their spiritual being, that's creating situations that we don't understand if we're looking at it from our perspective, or when we let our perspective get between us. When we let our perspective get our agenda, our belief, our values get between us and the person living with dementia, then we lose that ability to really see what really happened in this moment. So I had a lady who called me, and she called me and she said, I've got some really bad news. And I said, tell me more. And she said, the most horrible thing has happened. I just got out of the hospital. And I said, you're going to get used to this word. If you spend much time with me, tell me more. And she said, well, it's been hard to figure out, but I just got out of the hospital because my husband beat me up. And I was too shocked to say, tell me more. Because this was a family I knew from my faith community. This was a family I knew as people of a strong marriage, a strong relationship. And her husband with dementia, who had, the last time I was with him, he opened the car door for her. Her husband with dementia had beaten her up. And what can be going on? So we talked about it, and we talked about it, and we talked about it. And I'll share with you what happened. He had been in sales. And people who are in sales like to what? They like to make a certain appearance. And one of the things, men, this was like 50 years ago, men's fashions have changed. It used to be the big thing. The only thing that men really had control over were their shoes, because there had to be a certain white shirt, navy or certain colors, certain ties, socks and shoes that can maybe do a little bit of wiggle room with. So he had always loved a new pair of shoes. So it was Father's Day. His kids gave him a fancy name brand pair of shoes. So he's got his fancy name brand on shoes, goes into church for Father's Day. Everybody notices his shoes. Everybody makes a big deal of his shoes. Everything is good. Monday morning comes. They're going to work in the garden that day. They walk out. He walks out of his bedroom. I don't think I need to tell you what pair of shoes he had on. He had on what? Those brand new, fancy, brand name, expensive shoes. And he walked out, and his wife saw red. Because men's shoes are dang expensive. Men's shoes cost a lot of money. He walked out to work in the garden with his fancy shoes on. And his wife said, ain't no way. I paid good money for those shoes. Children chipped in for those shoes. You're not wearing those shoes out in the garden. And he said, they're my shoes. I'll wear them wherever. And it just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And he said, if you don't get out of my way, I'm going to knock the crap out of you. She didn't get out of his way. He knocked the crap out of her. And the reality is, it probably is much more complex than that. The reality is, it wasn't about the pair of shoes. The reality is, life had been hard for them for a while. The people who only saw them in church on Sunday were only seeing that tip of the iceberg. There was a lot that was happening in their home. There was a lot that was happening in their lives. So what really happened was a pair of shoes and a really complicated life wound up creating a situation that nobody ever wanted, ever would have expected, and changed their lives forever. So what can we learn from this? Well, we can learn that people living with dementia communicate. They communicate. So if people will say, oh, he can't communicate, oh, she can't communicate, what they're really meaning is they're not saying words I want to hear the way I want to hear them. Because I can communicate what I like. Because if I reach over here and I look at this bottle of water, I'm going to kind of look at it and go, do I have to say a word to let you know that this is not what I want? Now, we won't go into what I really want, but we'll just say this is, so you can really tell I can communicate what I like, and it's hot up here, what I want, and if it's really hot, what I need. So people's actions can show us what they feel. They can communicate with us when they're comfortable or when they're uncomfortable, when they're hungry or cold, or they need to let out some of the fluids that they've been taking in. Actions can show us the opposite of all of those things as well. Actions can show us what I don't like, or what I don't want, or what I don't need, or how I don't feel, or when I'm in pain, or when I'm full, when I'm hot, or when I've already eliminated. So we limit our relationships with people when we limit them to one way of communicating with us. So looking at what are people showing us with their actions as way of communicating with us. Here's the problem. Words are specific, but actions are clues. So if I'm pulling at my jacket, you can kind of vaguely know that this is not what I'm liking right now, right? It's not hard to figure out this is not working for me. The actions are clues. I may not be able to tell you it's itchy. There's a tag. Have you ever had a tag back there? There's a tag back there and I don't like it. The words are specific. The actions are clues. So how do we figure out the clues? Well, we figure out the clues by using the 6 Ps. Some of you may have heard me talk about the 6 Ps before. I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what the 6 Ps are. It starts with what is the problem. The first P is problem. What is happening? When is the person doing it? Where is the person doing it? What is the person doing? Is it really a problem or is it an inconvenience? I'm working on this in my own life. I am working on, is this thing that's happening right now an inconvenience or is it really a problem? The second P, who is this person? So I know this about my friend's mother, that she's never liked tags. And so if she's pulling like this, it might be tags. Another person's mother, it might be she's always been kind of hot-natured. And so it might be that she's hot. So I'm going to know things about the problem, know things about the person, and I'm going to put those two together and try to come up with, what do I think is the underlying thing? What do I think is the underlying issue? Then I'm going to come up with a plan. And I'm going to involve other people who know that person in the plan. I'm going to involve other other resources to come up with the plan, different perspectives. Then we're going to give it a chance to work by practicing it for a while. And then we're going to pass on what works and what doesn't work. So I'm going to go back and finish up with, what can we change? So going back to the lady and the shoes and the husband, we worked on a couple of things. We worked on, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You really want to carry these shoes. I'm so sorry. I hurt your feelings when I said you couldn't wear the shoes. We're going to work on body position, because if I turn to the side, I look a lot more approachable than when I'm standing like this. Because when I'm standing like this, I am standing like I am blocking the door. I am in charge. We can change the environment. And the environment might include what we traditionally think of, the physical environment. The environment might include the people in the environment. The environment might include, where can I get help from? Where can I get some respite from? And finally, and the last thing we're going to talk about is, what can we change? Self-care. Because many of us who are care partners in relationship with people living with dementia, we read self-care and we interpret selfish. So we think I'm supposed to take care of myself, and I substitute the word selfish for that. So I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath and blow it out. Find your support, find your people, find your way to take care of yourself, and reach out to the organizations who can give you support in that journey. Thank you for being with me. Hope you enjoy the rest of this amazing conference.